I believe there's something in life that's a lot bigger and more important than dominoes. I have faith that God will help me find it and that He'll show me the way to my ultimate goal, which is to go to heaven and to take as many people as possible with me. That is an excerpt from the book I want to talk to you about today, titled Monaghan, A Life by Joseph Pierce. Many people may not know that the founder of one of the most famous and financially successful restaurant chains, Domino's Pizza, is a faithful Catholic. That founder is Tom Monaghan, and this biography provides a wonderful look into his challenging upbringing, the circumstances that surrounded his founding of Domino's, and then the epic story of how he grew it into what it is today and how he goes on to be one of the most significant Catholic philanthropists ever. However, why should you and I focus on a businessman? Because your and I striving for holiness is not limited to church on Sunday or during private prayer. If we are to be made saints, it will be achieved only by living God's mission for us in every area of our life. And that does not exclude business or our jobs or whatever we're doing on a day-to-day basis. And so while not perfect, Tom Monaghan is an amazing example of someone we can endeavor to emulate as we seek to become successful in our business and in our faith. So back to the book now. Tom is born Thomas Stephen Monaghan on March 25th, 1937 in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And like many of the people you and I have studied, he experiences significant hardship very, very early in his life. His father dies when he is just 4 years old at the young age of 29, and his mother actually puts him and his brother into foster care. Imagine. So quoting from the book, the truth is that Anna is Tom's mother, Anna's desertion of her two sons had little to do with her inability to manage financially and much more to do with her inability to cope psychologically. I think in some ways this could be even more painful and more damaging than a reality in which both your parents passed away, because it implies that your mother does not want you. And this is one formative experience of many that continues to affect the trajectory of Tom's life. So he goes into foster care, and one of the foster homes that he is in is with a family called the Watmans. Back to the book here. Tom remembers kneeling beside his father during Mass, but the Watmans practiced no faith whatsoever. This struck Tom as being strange, and he asked Uncle Frank why they didn't go to church on Sunday. He was told that only bad people went to church, an explanation that Tom found unconvincing. I was only 5 or 6, but I didn't buy it. Imagine to think about how important the example you set as a parent is. Tom at this point is essentially, he has no parents, and the only people that he has to look up to are hypothetically these foster parents, and instead the image of his father kneeling during Mass when he was just 4 years old, a distant memory, is so powerful that he knows what his hypothetical role model and Uncle Frank is wrong. So how we carry ourselves is so important. You never know if you have kids or whomever is watching you, for better or worse. So moving forward, he is then transferred to St. Joseph Orphanage, and he ends up being there for 6 years. And while at the orphanage, he goes to school with normal kids, and this is sort of when he starts to understand his true situation. That's when I first started realizing how different I was. You know, everyone had a family. Everyone had nicer clothes, it seemed like. I looked forward to the day that I could live with my mother, but when that happened, it was almost hell. She was going into tantrums. She had highs and lows like you wouldn't believe. For no reason, she would chase me around the room with a broom screaming at me, even though I hadn't done anything. So, in some ways, Tom is better off when he's in the orphanage before he returns to his mother, and that returning to his mother actually ends up being extremely painful. He describes it as almost hell. So Tom ends up getting into some trouble, and his mom even calls the cops on him. So he borrows the car without asking, which of course he shouldn't have done. But his mom calls the cops on him instead of finding another way to fix the situation. He ends up spending the night in jail. So after this event and several others, he is sent again into foster homes, where he ends up working on various farms and at one point reads a biography of Abraham Lincoln. I think this is a really important point for us to focus on. His story inspired me to dream big. If a poor farm boy from Illinois could work hard and become president of the United States, why should he, a poor farm boy from Michigan, put limits on himself? I love this, and I love this mentality. Why not me? If he could do it, why can't I? This comes up later in the book as well, is Tom is obsessed with Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's. Love him or hate him, he is one of the most successful entrepreneurs ever. And after he reads this biography, he is so impressed, so obsessed with learning from him, that he takes this relentless approach to call him every single month, have someone on his team, like his secretary, call McDonald's every month until Ray agrees to meet. And this is way in the future when he is already a millionaire. So that is the sort of commitment that he places to learning from others, especially from biographies. And I think that this serves us well as we think about what you and I are trying to do here, is learning from biographies, learning from the greats that have come before us. This is what other people have done in their success stories as well. So during this time also, Tom notes that the closest thing he had to a father was his parish priest. And this is shockingly similar to Tolkien's upbringing. Also orphaned at a young age, he was essentially raised by a priest as well. And this had a similar effect on Tom as it had on Tolkien, as he is even drawn to the priesthood and goes to the seminary in 10th grade. Back to the book. The question on the application form asked the applicant why he wanted to become a priest. Tom answered that he sought the salvation of souls. It's ironic he would write more than 60 years later, but that's the entire purpose of my life and work today, my own soul included, of course. However, he is ultimately kicked out of seminary for similar behavior that he was having earlier in his life, and this absolutely crushes him at the time. However, he does end up graduating from high school, but at the bottom of his class. After high school, he ends up working several dead-end jobs before he is accepted to the University of Michigan. To pay for his education, he hitchhikes to Chicago to get a job to save money for tuition. Definitely a different time. But his plan fails, and he does not make enough. So with school not a possibility, he joins the Marine Corps. And there isn't much detail in the book about his service other than it having an extremely formative impact and experience on him. But it does note that he went to boot camp with Lee Harvey Oswald. Interesting fact, the man who assassinated President John F. Kennedy. He quotes as in describing Oswald as a little guy, very quiet and even a little strange. So interesting. Upon getting out of the Marine Corps and returning to Michigan is when Tom's brother Jim approaches him with a proposal for a business partnership to buy a pizza restaurant called Dominick's with an asking price of only $500 down. So despite not knowing much about pizza, they do it. And I think there's a lesson here for you and I as we think about our own business or our own job, is that belief always comes before our actual ability to do something. That you're never going to be able to take a risk, to make a leap, to do something risky if you don't have the belief in the first place. And that is not always a prerequisite to have the ability beforehand. And they clearly don't have that here. I think it's so cool because they trust, they have faith that they would be able to figure it out, Lord willing. So back to the book here. I was working almost every waking hour of the day and losing money every week. Tom rented a room across the street from the store and lived on scraps of food for the first half of 1961. Most of his meals were burnt or leftover pizzas that had never been picked up by customers. No one worked harder than Tom himself, who regularly worked from 10 a.m. until 4 o'clock in the morning the following morning, 7 days a week. This is that relentless, dogged determination that it takes to do something great. And we've seen it in several different areas in Tom's life so far. While he is in this grind, he proposes and gets married to his wife. They end up having 4 daughters. And in the beginning, they're only living on $50 a week. But business does start to pick up. And this is when they also start to change the name to Domino's and include the classic logo that we know today. So as the business continues to grow, Tom applies this maniacal focus on learning from others by packing his family into a car and driving to a new town on his one day off. On Mondays every week, he has one day off to try different pizza restaurants and learn from them. That is so impressive. However, the business starts to grow too quickly, and as more stores start to open, it starts to get away from Tom. It even gets to the point where the bank takes control and puts someone else in charge to fix the business. After some time, they basically strip it of anything valuable and pull out and essentially say that they want nothing more to do with it. So back to the book here. On March 22nd, 1971, the company was placed once more in Tom's control. They thought it was hopeless. They took anything of value out and gave me the company back. I was thrilled. I didn't care how long it took. I would bring the company back to solvency and from there proceed to build a national company. In other words, Tom has supreme confidence that whatever he is called to do, he has no doubt that he is going to get it done. This is impressive. This is fantastic. I can't imagine having the confidence that he has. The business is basically worth nothing, and the bank has essentially said they want nothing to do with it, and he knows that he's going to build it into a national company. Ultimately, after surviving 2 years of this, Tom learns from his mistakes, and never again would there be expansion for expansion's sake. Never again would untrained managers be sent into stores, and never again would he allow bureaucracy. This is super practical advice for you and I, or any founder, that ownership is key and that growth for growth's sake might not always be positive. But this begs the question, should you and I really even bother learning from successful people in business if our ultimate goal is just to follow the church and to get to heaven? I think the answer is yes. And it's because we can operate our business in a way that is not just following the law, but is going above and beyond to integrate the church's social teaching. And we'll see this is what Tom does. Back to the book. He was careful to look after the corporate store managers as well as the franchisees, rewarding them with 25% of the profits of their store, wishing to free as many of his employees as possible from what Chesterton and Distributus might call the proletarianized status of wage slavery. This management philosophy of integrating church teaching is not just charitable. It actually serves to improve the business as well. We're going to see an example of that right here. Back to the book. In the Catechism of the Catholic Church, subsidiarity is discussed in the context of dangers inherent in too much power being centralized in the hands of the state. Excessive intervention by the state can threaten personal freedom and initiative. The teaching of the Church has elaborated the principle of subsidiarity, according to which a community of higher order should not interfere in the internal life of a community of lower order, depriving the latter of its functions, but rather should support it in case of need and help it to coordinate its activity with activities of the rest of society, always with a view of the common good. So Tom applies this church teaching directly to Domino's as he says, I believe in giving people responsibility, and I insist on letting them make their own mistakes. This practice is not abdication, and it isn't really delegation either. It's the difference between a coach who lets the quarterback be the field general and the one who calls all the plays from the sidelines. I believe in picking the right quarterback and letting him do it himself. These changes help to optimize Domino's financial success, and Tom starts to amass a significant fortune at this point as the business grows. However, I love his take on how he views money. He says, money is not evil, as so many people think. It pays for Bibles and churches and hospitals. So this is not to say to pursue money for the sake of fame or power, but that business is not a zero-sum game. That's what Tom is saying here, that when he makes money, when businesses make money, it's not that you're stealing from other people. This is generating revenue. And if you are blessed to make a lot of money, it allows you the ability to use it for good. And these examples are taking care of the poor, building hospitals and churches. And this is exactly what Tom does. So on many different occasions, Tom is building infrastructure and hospitals in Central America. He's a millionaire at this point, flying coach instead of class, saving EWTN from financial crisis on one occasion, helping to fund the production of the new catechism on another. And ultimately, he finally sells Domino's to, quote, free up time for my foundation. That's the whole objective. I've completely lost interest in making money for myself. I'm completely cured. I've always had in the back of my mind that I was going to use my millions to give away anyhow, and now I'm there. With the selling of Domino's for over $1 billion to Bain Capital and his separate sale of the Detroit Tigers MLB team that he owned when he was a millionaire, he sets out to give everything to his foundation, inspired by the revitalization and success of Franciscan University of Steubenville. This is where he pours his billions into. And so he pours huge sums of money into the Catholic schools in Michigan, and then also resources for the religious, and also in Michigan, and ultimately starts what goes on to be Ave Maria University, with the goal of being the most authentically Catholic university in the U.S. Tom says their goal is, quote, helping our students get to heaven has to be our top priority, or we are missing the whole point. So to this day, Tom is still a tremendous philanthropist, still wakes up at 3 a.m. every day and does an hour of adoration before the Blessed Sacrament and works out. This is so cool. That is where I will leave it now, though. This was an amazing book and a tremendous opportunity to see someone who has worked extremely hard, been blessed to become a billionaire, and has since committed his life to give it all back. Again, this was Monaghan, A Life by Joseph Pierce, and there's much more detail in the book that I do not cover here, but if you would like to get it for yourself, get it using the link in the description below, and you will be supporting the podcast at the same time. Thank you, and Deo Gratias.